Kelly Ripa and Mark Consuelos are more than just television personalities to many. In a world full of fleeting fame and surface-level headlines, they have come to symbolize something that feels enduring: real love, laughter, partnership, resilience. Over decades in the public eye, they've shared triumphs and troubles, celebrated victories and borne losses. Their relationship has felt like a rare counterpoint to the sharp, shifting tides of showbiz. Yet when some deeply personal medical crisis struck, it forced that carefully balanced facade of smiles and banter to fracture. And what came through the crack was raw, unfiltered, and profoundly human. The morning that changed everything. It was supposed to be an ordinary morning, the kind that arrives gently, Mark lively, full of his usual energy, Kelly slipping into studio mode, the routines humming in the background. But fate had other plans. At home, without warning, Mark fainted. The shock was immediate and devastating. The confident, strong husband collapsed in front of his partner and family. For Kelly, accustomed to television, to rehearsal, to control, the ground shifted beneath her feet. Instinctively, she reached for her phone, fumbling numbers, eyes swimming with panic. She dialed 911. Outside, everything looked calm. The neighbours' window shutters, the quiet street, the ordinary rise of morning light. But inside their home, fear had swallowed the space whole. Kelly later described the feeling that time itself had stopped, that Mark, the man she leaned on, the person who anchored her life, was slipping away right before her eyes. In the ambulance ride that followed, amid flashing lights and hurried paramedics, Kelly's mind oscillated between hyper-awareness and muted shock. What was happening? Could everything change in a single breath? At the hospital, she stood by as doctors swarmed around Mark, cords and monitors, whispered decisions, the quiet chaos of life in the balance. A wife's silent prayer. In the emergency room, Kelly watched through a haze of dread. Mark lay on the bed, surrounded by white coats, machines beeping, hurried staff assessing, needles, the sterile smell of antiseptics. She clenched a fist. The other hand bowed in silent prayer behind her mask, as though she could will him back to safety simply by willing. This was not the confident public persona people knew. This was Kelly, the terrified spouse, exposed, vulnerable, unsure. She later admitted that she felt utterly powerless. Even as a woman accustomed to commanding her domain, to holding an audience's attention, she found herself reduced to one burning wish. Please don't take him away from me. This is a phrase every person sitting in a hospital waiting room can understand, even if they've never been in Kelly Ripa's shoes. It carries the weight of every tick of the clock, every footstep that passed the door, every heartbeat that might slow or stop. Each second stretched, long, heavy, unbearable. The public unravelling news of Mark's collapse surfaced quickly. Fans and media scrambled to piece together facts. Kelly was soon thrust into the uncomfortable position of public witness. With her voice trembling and eyes reddened, she gave updates, not as a polished host, but as a woman feeling her heart fracture. Her words carried pain, fear, and fragility. She thanked the medical staff with genuine emotion. She spoke of being bewildered in his absence. She didn't sugarcoat her uncertainty. She said she didn't know what would happen next. She acknowledged how life felt unmoored. She revealed that the security she felt in her private life had, in that moment, evaporated. In doing so, she shattered the myth that public figures are somehow exempt from desperate fear. She showed that even someone who appears unflappable can tremble with uncertainty when confronted with a loved one's mortality. Family in the dark. While Kelly addressed cameras, behind the scenes their children, Michael, Lola, Joaquin, were processing their own shock. Kelly spoke with admiration later about how mature they were, how they attempted to understand without being overwhelmed, how they asked questions not to frighten but to find footing. In a moment of rupture, the family rallied. They stood shoulder to shoulder in hospital corridors, whispering encouragement. When Kelly felt she might crumble, they offered steady arms. When tears threatened to spill, they held her up. In those hallways, amid sterile walls and anxious monitors, they found solace in togetherness, because in moments of uncertainty, nothing is more powerful than the touch of those you love. Into the intensive care unit, doctors eventually determined that Mark's condition required critical level monitoring, and he was moved to the ICU. For Kelly, this was the most terrifying moment thus far, a boundary she'd never crossed before in quite this way. The doctors asked her to wait outside to stay in the waiting room. She later described the hallway as a gauntlet. Every footstep echoed. Every door that opened made her stomach constrict. Each passing nurse, every whisper of movement made her heart leap with fear. She felt as though the doors to the ICU were gates between life and something else. The minutes crawled as she paced, sat, stared, prayed. Then came a moment she later admitted was a breaking point. She couldn't stay silent any longer. She erupted, cried outwards, shuddering with grief, her body trembling like an exposed wire. In the waiting room, posture slumped, hands shaking, she let the sorrow out. It was raw, unguarded, and real. To the world, Kelly Ripa was a celebrity, a public figure with glamour and strength. In that waiting room, she was simply a wife scared for her husband. Crawling toward hope hours passed. Updates trickled in. The medical team, cautiously optimistic, offered fragments of reassurance. Mark was stable, but not out of danger. The term recovery was too early to claim. Kelly, back beside him, held his hand through monitors and machines. She whispered of more mornings together, more laughter, more life. She looked at Mark, fragile but alive, and made a silent promise. If he could survive this, she would cherish every dawn, every ordinary day that followed. In that moment, as she grasped his hand, she spoke her epiphany aloud, that she had understood something more deeply than ever, that love is not measured only in ease, but in how fiercely you hold on when life threatens to let go. More than a health scare. Public coverage of celebrity hospitalizations often leans towards speculation, sensationalism, or cliché. But Kelly's response transcended that. She shared fear, uncertainty, gratitude, and hope. She named emotions many people feel but rarely reveal. Though she did not disclose every detail of Mark's condition, she made clear that their family, their children, their faith, their bond were their anchor. She thanked the medical professionals not as distant figures but as heroes in her personal journey. She acknowledged the audience, fans, well-wishers, not as a PR gesture, but as an outpouring she deeply felt. Her transparency struck a chord. Many people, celebrities, everyday fans, those who had sat in hospital waiting rooms, shared stories of their own medical scares or fragile moments. They said, "We see you, Kelly. We've been there." Her vulnerability broke the boundary between star and individual. The lesson she left behind. In that terrifying time, Kelly Ripa offered more than updates. She offered lessons rooted in love, faith, and humanity. These are few of the lessons that still resonate. Love is action when words are insufficient. She didn't just tell Mark she loved him. She sat, she waited, she held, she prayed. In that bond, truth spoke louder than language. Fear does not equal weakness. To admit fear is not to collapse under it, but to live through it. Kelly's confession of her trembling heart was strength in its own way. Life's fragility demands gratitude. After that kind of scare, the mundane becomes sacred. The morning light, shared laughter, coffee, waking beside your partner. She recognized how precious each day is. Support matters. The presence of family in hospital corridors, faith in whispers, medical staff's care, fans' prayers. They all form a net beneath us when we fall. Legacy isn't only about success. The way we treat each other in hardship, how we hold on, how we release, how we grieve with dignity, that becomes part of what we leave behind.